We'll know here in a second. And we're recording, and my loyal viewers will notice a different venue for today's webinar. I have moved my base of operations back to the farm. A lot of you don't know I actually have a second house. It's in Scranton near the Ordinariate Parish that we attend, and my wife runs their homeschooling cooperative, so it's important for us to have a place that's close. It's a real crappy little row house. Cost us about $40,000. But anyway, I'm back on the farm now, and so hopefully the internet's a little sketchy on the farm. And we also have, I don't have my books here yet. They'll be here soon. So just bear with how things look. But I think the lighting is a little better in here. Anyway, I'm excited because today we have, and I'm going to take my glasses off to get rid of the glare. We have Father John Gribowich joining us for the interview today. Affectionately known by his friends as either Grib or Father Grib or John. But I'm going to call him Grib because that's what I've called him most of my adult life, among other names. So, Grib is a priest. He's a priest, sort of, I think. You're still a priest, right? Yeah. Priest of the Diocese of Brooklyn, although he's a Philly boy. Grew up in Philadelphia. And, I mean, he can't say certain words like shouldn't, it becomes shouldn't. Ruined becomes ruined. Crayon, I'm not even going to talk about crayon. What is it with people in Philadelphia calling a crayon a crown? How do you get crown out of Crayon? I have no idea.
I don't know either,
anyway,
actually. But
we've made fun of Grib's Philadelphia isms his entire life. Long story is how he got from Philly to Brooklyn. And he is actually also the co-owner of our Dorothy Day Catholic Worker Farm, where I'm broadcasting from today. And currently, he's exploring a new vocation as a monk at the Commodores Monastery near Big Sur, California. Oh, we should all be so unfortunate as to have to, all the hardships of being out at Big Sur, all the asceticism and the whipping that you must engage in,
it's pretty tough
out over the ocean. Anyway, so welcome, Father Grib. Welcome, Grib. And we're going to talk today about is there anything you want to, we originally met because you were a student of mine and Carrie's, my wife, at DeSales University near Center Valley, Pennsylvania, which is near Allentown. You also have I think you're like Max Potts. I think you've got about 18 degrees or something or other. How many degrees do you have?
Well, let's see. I graduated with theology and history at DeSales, and then I got my MA in theology at St. Charles Seminary. And then I got my MS in art history and also an MS in library science at Pratt. And then I got the Master's of Divinity at St. Joseph Seminary, Dunwoody. And I got the MBA at UC Berkeley.
And that's where you first discovered the monastery.
Camaldolese.
The Camaldolese Monastery. I'm going to turn...
Which you are actually affiliate with. You're kind of technically affiliate with the order because of being a oblate.
Oh, I am? Oh, I guess.
Yeah, because of the monastery in New York with the nuns.
Okay.
In fact, Sister Donald. Yeah, she was just recently here in Berkeley.
Yes,
visiting us.
Like Dorothy Day, Carrie and I are both Benedictine oblates, and we're associated with the Monastery of Transfiguration in Windsor, New York, which is a monastery of 3 Benedictine nuns, one of which is Sister Donald, who apparently was just out at Big Sur, right?
Well, technically she was at Berkeley. I'm at Incarnation Monastery in Berkeley right now, which is the urban monastery affiliated with Big Sur. So She was here, and she's a Camaldolese nun. And and she worked with Dorothy Day, so she knew her personally.
That's right. Okay, so let's get right to the topic at hand today, even though we've engaged in some banter here for 5 minutes. Why in the heck are you pursuing a monastic vocation? You went from being a diocesan priest to now pursuing a monastic vocation. I think, viewers might be interested in terms of their own spiritual journey. By the way, I hate that term. Can we come up with a different term? I don't like the term spiritual journey. It's just way too Dr. Phil. I don't know.
I don't
you
know
know what I
what
mean?
to say.
It's way too M. Scott Peck for me. I mean, or Deepak Chopra, or no. So what in the hell are you doing? What in the hell are you doing at a monastery?
Maybe it's more about like the experience of detachment and attachment. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's even sounding more therapeutic or whatnot. But I think it's just discernment. It's just continual discernment, right? And first off, I think this is kind of cool. I think this is the first serious thing we ever did together, doing a podcast like this. So usually we're just having fun. So hopefully this will also be fun too, though. But, I think that you know a little bit of my story, but I think just the way to kind of convey it to your listeners, I had a very strong and powerful experience when I went to the Abbey of Gethsemane in Kentucky when I was a seminarian, right before I was ordained a deacon. And it was interesting going there because I kind of went there thinking more of it as like a field trip, just to kind of see Merton's Hermitage and that kind of thing. But I got very much drawn into the rhythm of the prayer there, the Liturgy of the Hours especially. And I just, by the end of my time there that week, I just had the sense that, wow, I could really see myself doing this. And I didn't necessarily think that I would be doing it in Gethsemane. There was nothing about the actual place there that made me think I was going to be there. But something hit me, and I think I was also taken. I remember preaching about this the very first time I was a deacon, like at the first Mass I preached at, where I was just taken by the fact that, there's so many things wrong with the world, as we all know. And I could only imagine how worse things could be if there weren't places of contemplative prayer happening, that were not just offering a refuge for people, but really having a strong intercessory power happening at the world. I just really saw that connection. It was just very strong to me. And I also thought too that, how much more the world could be healed if there were more monasteries, if there were more contemplatives. So I really did sense that, and I know it's a very strange thing to think about, but I was even taken by the fact that even like scientists who like study like quantum physics and things like that, when they talk about like entanglement, about like how like everything kind of started at one and then it was, blown away, but it's all made to somehow still be relational to each other. I think that is a great way of understanding the power of prayer, where our energy, so to speak, that we send through our prayers can really affect other people in ways that we just don't know about. So I really do think that's a real thing. So that's what I was taken away with when I went to Gethsemane. And as I went along and became a deacon and a priest, it never really left me. And even when I was in the parish, I was just thinking, I just don't think this is the right place for me to be. And I know that you know that very well, because I would be complaining about things all the time. But eventually, when I was working on my degree at Berkeley, being in California, I think was a very good experience for me, because first off, there were a lot of different types of ideas floating around here, and meeting lots of different people with different ways of looking at things, which to me was exciting, but also just the geography of the place here. I mean, there's a vastness to the ocean, the mountains, the trees, and it really kind of brought you into a contemplative place where you just felt like you were a participant in something greater than yourself. And I think by the time I concluded my studies here, I was like ready to go into a monastery. Unfortunately, my bishop was okay with me trying it out. And I went to the Abbey of the Genessee in upstate New York, simply because I had a very good relationship with him for many years. And I thought that would be the natural place for me to go. And that's where I went. And then eventually, after I did the posthumously and after the season of COVID, which kind of made things kind of goofy for a bit, eventually I entered as a postulant at Genessee, and I lasted a whopping 4 months. But those were a very, very powerful 4 months.
But you beat the odds, though. I mean, some friends of ours, we were laying down some bets as to whether or not you'd last 2 months, 3 months, 8 months.
Right.
So 4 months, you beat some of the bets. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Right there.
Well, that's how it is. And there's a lot of reasons maybe why I left, but I will say the one thing that did happen to me there, which is kind of what I'm kind of unpacking with you today, and I think can maybe be spoken of in a broader context too, is that I think what really cracked open for me at Genessee during those months was really some very deep wounds that I was carrying, and I didn't know enough about them. And I'd say a lot of that was a great help with the psychological evaluation. So I think that was a really big help. And then, of course, just when you're thrown into that rhythm of prayer where you really have to face a lot of things on your own, you start to see certain things. And I think once that cracked open and I had to really just see where certain things were that were major issues, I would say, that I had to kind of at least resolve in some type of way. The next step was like, well, how do you resolve them? And what do you do? And I didn't think that I could resolve them in Genessee. I didn't think that it provided the opportunity for me to do that. I need to be in a place that offered even more silence and solitude. And it doesn't mean that it would not have worked maybe for someone else who was also going through a similar experience. But for me, it just didn't seem to make sense. So I decided to look at the commodities because I knew they were a group of hermits and they were out here in California. I had been out here on retreat. So that's what brought me to Big Sur. And I was there all of this Lent.
Okay, so a couple of things. First, with regard to Genessee and, that it wasn't contemplative enough for you. I think I recall that Thomas Merton had a sort of similar complaint. I think what a lot of people, lay people in particular, misunderstand is that one can be actually quite busy in a lot of Benedictine monasteries, that it's not all a bunch of guys in pointy hats walking around in complete silence, 24/7. That there's a lot of activity going on in a lot of Benedictine monasteries, which is why a lot of Benedictines, eventually want something a little more hermetic, like you. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that we're at a very unique time in the history of monasticism, especially in the Western world, I think. And I don't know if a lot of the Benedictine monasteries know what to do right now. I think that's probably the case with the church at large. I think that there was, as Merton would talk about, there was just this unnatural increase of vocations following World War II. And that created a massive monastic infrastructure. And because of that, their industries took a prominence. And so most Benedictine monasteries who still have an industry essentially are trying to maintain a legacy product at this point. And they don't have nearly enough monks to run these things, but yet there's still enough of a demand, and there's also a need to have these products fueling the monastery.
So you get like bakeries, you get breweries, you get coffee, those kinds of things, and they just became these massive industries.
Yeah, they did. And I think that, they became very American in that sense, where it just kind of screamed of, a great American success story. And it was, capitalism at all costs in a certain sense, because it was just really a way to, look at the fact that the monasteries were part of the American experience. And there was nothing wrong with that in a certain sense, but there was also, because they had the numbers where they could pull it off. But the thing, though, is that now I don't think that most people who are going to a monastery are really there because they think this is a good way for them to productively use their talents in working on an industry per se. I think that there's always going to be a need for manual labor and whatnot. But so that's why I'm saying, I think that the monasteries are struggling because of the fact that they're maintaining legacy products, and they don't understand how to pivot from that. It's very, very hard to pivot. Now at Big Sur it was different because fortunately, maybe it was just providence, they never built large to begin with. I think the most amount of guys they had there at one time were maybe around 25 guys. Now they're probably down to half that. But that's still okay because they didn't have like a massive operation where they had to maintain. So it gave them a certain type of malleability to pivot to whatever was coming down the pike. Although I think that they too are facing their challenges too as to what the monastery looks like in the future. And I think the other thing too is that there are a lot of lay people right now who are very intrigued by contemplative life and monasteries especially. And I think that monasteries also have to kind of play to that need. They have to be able to integrate the laity.
Yes. I want to talk about that in a bit. But before I get there, I want to address a sort of elephant in the living room that a lot of my viewers might be scratching their head and saying, okay, he's in a hermitage and he's on the internet doing a computer interview. And I hope I don't embarrass you when I say that if I send you a text message on your iPhone, I usually get a response in about 15 minutes to half an hour. So I'm just going to lay it out there. What's up with that, Mr. Hermit?
Yeah.
I guess
I think that
hermitage with Wi-Fi or whatever.
Yeah, no, I think that the key thing to know here is that there is no one definition of hermit, first off. And the commodities especially are a unique order because it's a deal where you can go as deep into the silence and the solitude as you want, or you could be as active of a monk as possible too. So it provides this whole spectrum of where you really feel you are being drawn at that time. So there are certain guys who entered the monastery who had very active roles within the community. And then over time, they became recluse, like completely off the grid, like not even seeing them. Like there was one monk who I didn't see for a whole month because he was in his hermitage completely by himself. And, as far as that too, it also can be, how much you want to regulate your technology as well. So it's a unique situation because it's an order that doesn't just prescribe exactly what you have to do. I know that may be hard for certain people to understand because everyone thinks that a religious order is designed to do just that. This is kind of creating this big space to kind of take you where you are and see, where you're being led. And I think that it's kind of neat to have the leverage to go deeper when you feel like you need to go deeper, and to also come out and be more active, so to speak, when that comes too. For me personally, it definitely works with my temperament, which you know. And I think that it's kind of cool to be able to be very engaged in the world, but to also realize I gotta pull away. And the great thing is that no one in the order is going to stop you from pulling away. No one's going to say, well, guess what? You've committed to all these things and you got to do this stuff. I mean, the primacy is always silence and solitude. So therefore, as much as you want for that, that's what you're allowed to do.
Well, that's all very interesting. And I think it speaks to perhaps, some people, some of a more traditionalist bent might listen to that and say, sounds to me like a hippie commune. It sounds like a bunch of loosey-goosey liberal types out there dancing around, singing Western Priory songs and whatnot. All right. On the other hand, I don't think that's the case. I think what we're looking at is a model for modern monasticism that has to take into account the differences that the modern world presents to the monastic life that they have to take account of, like what kind of persons does the modern world create? Because these are the people that will be joining the monastery. And so maybe instead of seeing it as a liability and as a problem, we have to beat these people into our cookie cutter mold of what a hermit is supposed to be. It might be the case where they're now simply looking at this as an opportunity to, in some ways, redefine their monastic life. Am I right about this, or what's?
Well, I think so. That's my hope for the commodities order. I think that they have a great potential to do that. I think that first off, it's such an interesting thing because of all the categories that we can think of on, say, the spectrum of, say, left, right, conservative, liberal, all that kind of stuff. I can't easily put these guys on any place on the spectrum. I've never encountered anything which I thought was like, wow, that was really far out there. Like, I don't know if I'm cool with that. Things have been actually very well integrated. And I think there's a genuine desire on the part of the order to affirm the tradition of the church, as well as being open to whatever else is happening in the world and outside the church too. I mean, that's a hard balance to strike. But I think they do a pretty good job. I've like I said, I think that there's a great love for the liturgy here, a great love for the especially the office, but there's also just a sense that, we need to become better contemplatives. And a lot of times other traditions right now seem to be doing that better than, say, Western, Christianity. And I think that only by integrating that, it can actually bring out what's best in Catholicism.
So that
I could talk more about that if you want.
Well, go ahead. Yeah. Elaborate even further on that, especially, it does seem like at one time Western Catholicism had, tons of monasteries and tons of monks. And I don't mean just post-war. I mean going back centuries and centuries. What in the heck happened, other than the fact that Henry VIII murdered most of them in England and whatnot? I mean, but why? I guess maybe it has something to do with the pragmatic bent of the American mind. But there were lots of monasteries, even here in the United States at one time, that were thriving, like I said, even before World War II. So in a sense, what's going on, and why? I mean, you said before at the beginning of this, we need more monks, we need more monasteries, we need more people engaged in that kind of vicarious substitutionary prayer for the sake of the world, because we are all entangled with each other. Word I like to use is omnisubjectivity. In incorporating ourselves into Christ, we're part of a corporate subjectivity. And so there is a kind of omni-subjectivity. So when I say a prayer, I really am affecting everyone else in the body. So we need these monasteries. We do. They're the heart and soul. Why aren't there more? What's going on? What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's not a clear understanding as to what a monastery does. I think that might be one issue. I think that there's a lot of ideas as to like what people want when they arrive at a monastery, but then they get there and they're like, this is not what I was thinking it was about. And then they end up leaving. And sometimes that's the fault of the monastery. Sometimes it's just where the person is and they're just not ready for what they're being brought into. I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that it is a scary type of commitment, and we are completely in a type of a culture where, the more options, the better. But of course, that just paralyzes people. So the minute you feel like you have to kind of commit yourself to something and means that you're going to detach yourself from certain things, it becomes very scary. So I think that's one of the reasons. And also there's just not like an ethos in the world right now that is longing for spiritual things within a tradition per se. I mean, you get some of this in some Eastern religions, but it's also the demands maybe not always may be the strongest there. It's kind of things that people can dabble with, but it doesn't really require like a lifetime commitment. So I think lifetime commitments, which are what monasteries are known for, and vows of stability are very scary to people. And so that's just something that we have to chip away at. But I think that on the other hand, too, we have to look at what is happening. I think there is a great spiritual hunger for a lot of people have. Even people who aren't really religious, I think, have a spiritual hunger. And I think that monasticism is connecting with those people on a certain level, but just not in the point where they would want to join the monastery. There are a lot of retreatants, for example, from all different backgrounds who would come to Big Sur. But, actually join the monastery, that's something else.
Yeah, true. But that brings me to the discussion of the laity. I mean, I've noticed anytime I've gone to a monastery for retreat or whatever, lots of lay people all over the place and wanting to do the retreat. So there's a thirst there for the rhythms of the monastic life on the part of lay people, but not a thirst necessarily for, well, I'm going to do this full time. But that makes me wonder if, the future of monasteries might be a kind of back to the future situation where, I mean, as you well know, 500, 600, 800 years ago, if you go back to the medieval world, it wasn't unusual at all for there to be a monastery, which would then be surrounded by a community, a community of farmers, tradesmen, and so forth. And there was this wonderful symbiosis between the life of the monastery and the life of the peasants around the monastery. And I'm wondering, could we in some ways recover that model?
I think we're going to have to in some way. I mean, you can never romanticize anything that was from the past. I mean, it's going to have to be something new, but it's going to have to be building off primarily with what is at the core of the monastic life, which is contemplation. I think that the thing that we need to be cultivating right now, and this kind of gets to some other things I would kind of talk about at the church at large, is I just don't think we're good at cultivating just contemplatives in general. It's one thing to try to want to rebuild the monasteries, and trust me, I'm all about it. But it seems the thing in our reach right now is how do we create just a contemplative stance with people? I mean, we live in a very noisy world. It's just like impossible to find a moment to yourself. But I really do believe that is the gift of monasticism in general. And I think that out of that, people can start listening to their heart, start listening to what God is speaking to them, and then giving them the courage to move forward. So I think we really are like at a spiritual crisis here that needs to be addressed by helping people to become contemplatives, often contemplatives in action, as sometimes I like to say. And I think that my experience at Big Sur reminded me of this. And if you let me just share something that happened to me while I was there, which I thought was very kind of powerful. I mentioned how I really went to Big Sur with this intention of just really wrestling with certain ways to heal from certain wounds within my experience with my life. And one of the things I did was what was known as a life lexio. One of the monks would call it that. And it's like where you're really unpacking different events of your life and looking at the twists and turns of what you did and things like that. And that a long time to do. And it was very I would say emotional at times, but it was good. But the thing that really came to me was on Holy Thursday, after the Mass was done, and we had the Blessed Sacrament in the repository. And at Big Sur, it's a very, very simple repository. So the procession went to what is our chapter room there, and it was just a simple altar, Blessed Sacrament on top of the altar, and just one vase of flowers. And there were no pews. There were only places for you to kneel, or if you want to sit on a cushion. It was very sparse. And I was just taken by that. And I was just really drawn into prayer in a very deep way. And it's difficult because I'm not always drawn into prayer, at least in that type of way. And it was powerful. And I just felt like almost God was saying to me, allow the presence of me to come out of you. Like, don't have it bottled in anymore. Just become fully alive in me, fully alive in Christ. And after it was done in my hermitage where I had Wi-Fi, I went on to Facebook or Instagram or one of those things. And of course, a lot of priest friends and other Catholics who I know were showing all these pictures of their Holy Thursday celebrations and the pictures of their repositories. And it was a very noticeably stark difference. Repositories being very ornate and rightly so. I mean, I'm not criticizing anything like that. But I can't tell you, like, I had such a visceral reaction to the whole thing. I was like, what is going on here? Why am I so upset here with what I'm looking at on Facebook? These are all just images of Holy Thursday. And it came to me that because I was so going with such a deep dive of my life, that what that implied to me was that it was a sense of the church on an institutional level trying to show up and being at its best when really certain things deeper within the institutional church still have yet to be addressed. Because in my life, I can say, and this is something that we can talk about a little bit here, is that I have been profoundly affected by the clerical sexual abuse scandal, profoundly. And so much so that, thinking back on my life, I mean, like, even the priest who baptized me, I mean, I found out in the early 2000s, I mean, this guy was like a serial pedophile rapist. I mean, and then a priest who mentored me in high school was grooming me. The same priest who took me to the Abbey of the Genessee. So, like, I had a certain kind of connection that was very, very tangible. And I just was kind of looking at these pictures, thinking to myself, there's something wrong here, because it's not necessarily because I didn't like the pageantry or the chalices and the chasubles, because there's another context where I'm totally fine with all that stuff. Like when I go to the ordinary at Mass, that's a very beautiful Mass, but I don't feel like that type of reaction. There was something there that night that hit me. And I think it just made me come to this realization that I don't think we as a church have been able to fully own this scandal and fully be able to just say, we are just broken and we really need Jesus, which is what we're always telling people that they need him. Well, we as a corporate body need the healing presence of Christ. And I think that can only be done if we get away, and this sounds kind of horrible saying it this way, if we get away from just making Catholicism about sacramental events and actually allowing the sacraments to kind of transform us, to make us into contemplatives in action, where we're living a sacramental worldview. We're always looking deeper into things around us and really trying to see, where is Christ in the mess? I think that is something I kind of want to unpack, maybe even with you here, Larry, because I think it might be the answer to alleviating clericalism as we know about it in the church as well. Because I think that it helps priests themselves to once again have to look at their own mess and their own problems and become disciples first and then pastors second.
Wow. Yeah. My reaction to all of that is, okay, we're finally getting down to brass tacks here, getting down to something serious. And my reaction is, burn it all down, baby. Burn it all down.
Yeah.
My reaction is it's like yours. Not just with regard to the priest sex scandal, because personally, I think you've nailed something important here, that the sexual abuse scandal, horrible and awful as it is actually a symptom of a much deeper disease, a much deeper rot within the church. And you've correctly identified there's no contemplative life in the church, which means there's no prayer, which means there's no faith. We've become this church of sacramental functionary activities, and the sacraments are meant to be the communication of the divine mystery. They're mysteries, and a mystery opens you up to a vast horizon. They're portals to the other world, portals to the supernatural fulfillment that we're meant to have. But that means they're embedded in a much deeper and broader context of evangelical faith, commitment, what von Balthasar called the Ernstfall, the moment of decisive decision. This is where the church, in its accommodation to bourgeois modernity, in its what Barron calls, Bishop Barron, the beige Catholicism, what that Catholicism creates is this notion that I'm not in any way, shape, or form to be put out by the faith. The faith makes no demands or challenges upon me. And this is true of the lay people, it is for the clergy. So you get this church, this flabby, flaccid church with no internal muscle to it, no internal vibrancy or life. And as far as I'm concerned, the parish structure that we live with now, the parish culture that we live with now, burn it down. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I could not agree more, because of the fact that the whole irony here is that we have become so clerical because we just treat the sacraments always as ends. and they're never means into going deeper into something like that. It's almost as if, like, the Eucharist is the place to hone a certain type of muscle so that when you leave the church, you can see things in that same type of way where everything is the hidden presence of Christ in some way. I mean, everything that exists only exists because God is allowing it. In fact, I was really taken by the fact that I've been reading this, here it is, this little devotional book from the 50s called My Way of Life. And it's it's kind of a way to kind of give Aquinas to like a modern world. And, as much as 50s Catholicism was all about smells and bells and fish fries, I mean, this is like some meaty things that I think that people could take away from it. I just sit there thinking, why didn't this ever get translated into the pews in some type of meaningful way where people could actually engage in the world in a sense where they're not just dependent upon constantly coming back to the sacraments, but really, taking the sacraments and just, drenching and drinking in all the graces that are from them. Like, there was a great monk at Big Sur who was a recluse. So I didn't see him for a month. And then when I did see him, we had a great conversation. And he talked about, like, say, COVID as a perfect example. Like, when the churches all closed down. Now, whether you agree with them closing down, that's a whole other issue. But when they did close down, it was as if the church had no clue what to do except quickly, let's Zoom masses so people feel connected to the mass. Now, I understand why they did that, and I'm not here to criticize that, but it really shows that, for people who've been going to mass for years, receiving the sacraments hundreds and hundreds of times, like, to be away from them doesn't necessarily mean that you're away from Christ. It's like, now's the time to actually really live what you have already received. And I don't think that we talk about that because everything is just always dependent upon the clerical system and the sacramental system that's fueled by it. And I think that's a problem. There's something not healthy with all that.
Oh, I agree. And I think a lot of the criticism that was leveled at the bishops by some quarters of the church for so quickly acquiescing to the government shutdown. I think that these were mean-spirited criticisms for the most part, rooted in in other words, any opportunity to trash the bishops, let's just trash the bishops. But then, and so I really, there was a big part of me that felt like, okay, churches are shut down now. We can live with this for a few months. No big deal. Flatten the curve, all that kind of stuff. It's got to do with charity for our neighbors. But I noticed the same thing you did, that your recluse friend did. One of the things that struck me is, okay, one of the things that we should be doing is sending out notices to parishioners, let's pray the Liturgy of the Hours more. All right. Let's engage in Lectio Divina more. Let's engage in contemplative prayer more. No. You're right. It was, let's Zoom these masses.
And by the way, no one's attending mass over Zoom. I mean, like, I understand that it's a kind of a nice thing to be connected, but it's not mass. I mean, the sacraments either have a proximity to them or they don't. I mean, if we can just have one mass said at Rome for everyone in the world, I mean, then what's the point of having an actual sacramental moment in person? Anyway,
yeah, let's just have the Pope say mass every day, and then we'll just live stream it or record it and stream it to everybody in the world. So we actually won't need any priests anymore. It's just be a Pope doing mass every day for everybody. And here you go. So you're right. I mean, there's a reason why we don't do confessions over the telephone, and haven't since the invention of the phone. And it's the same here. But anyway, to get back to the main point, which is this absolute lack of the development of a deeper contemplative sense in the church. Now, I get it, all right? Lay people are busy. We're all infected with this modern spirit, and priests are reluctant to sort of push back against that. But for crying out loud, what are we about if we're not pushing back against that? What are we about? I personally think that one of the most boring places in the modern world, in the modern universe, are most Catholic parishes on a Sunday morning. That's what I think. There is so little that grips you there. so little that's visceral. There's so little that just sort of punches you in the face with the provocation of the gospel. And I don't mean this in a jerk sort of way. We don't want to be jerks about it, although maybe sometimes we could. You get my point. You go there and it's nice to be nice to the nice. These pablum sermons, Okay, now we're engaged in a lament that everybody, from our side of the spectrum, laments. Boring liturgies, boring parishes. Well, the reason why we lament it is because it is so pervasive. And that's what I'm saying needs to be burned down. That kind of contractual Catholicism has got to go.
Yeah, well, I think it's so. The irony is that the more that parishes are trying to make things interesting at Mass, the worse that becomes, the more boring it becomes, actually, because it's trying to do something which I don't think the liturgy is meant to do. Like, there's a certain type of simplicity, I think, that we need to return to the liturgy, not because we're trying to belittle the importance of the sacramental moment, but when I say simplicity, is like it's okay if we just have silence more in the liturgy. Like can we just do that at least a little bit more, where instead of filling everything up with something going on? There's something powerful about that. I mean, here in New Commodity and here at Incarnation, there's no musical instruments, so everything is just a cappella, and I think there's something very beautiful about that, and that's simple. But when you're in a very noisy world, why would you want to make your Mass experience, just equally as kind of
noisier?
Noisier. Now, granted, I understand there's other legitimate forms of praise that could happen at Mass. I'm not trying to blanket things, but it's just interesting how we are trying to make the Mass too much of an event that people are going to be all excited about, when they're just walking away thinking that was ridiculous, And I was actually thinking about maybe a good analogy right now that we're dealing with the parishes is that we all remember the days when there were, chains of video rental stores, right? That's where we all would go to get our movie for the night, right? And that was kind of exciting, and everyone was doing it. It was a ritual type of thing in a certain sense, right? Well, in time, they just became completely irrelevant because everyone was streaming everything on Netflix or whatnot. So, but I think that the Catholic Church right now is thinking that, well, we have this franchise system of essentially video rental stores, and we're just going to double down on this. We have to keep on doing these things, And the reality is sometimes people still have a sentimental want to go back to a video rental store, and sometimes people could go to one and still have a fun time, but that's not where things are right now. And I think that you're going to start seeing a whole new way of doing church, and it's not just a capitulation to, say, the culture. It's about trying to really affirm what is good happening right now, but also then realizing what better could be brought into the equation too. When video store rental places closed, we did lose something too. I mean, it wasn't as if somehow Netflix is better. It's just different. So it's about once again recapturing what's good about the parish model and letting go the stuff that's completely irrelevant. I mean, like I said, I actually talk to a lot of priests these days who are struggling big time. And my one priest friend who's also discerning monastic life, he's like, I'm just tired of doing hospice care at a parish, because that's what it is. It's just knowing that this model is dying. And there's just people hanging on for dear life, thinking that this is the only way to do it. And by the way, this is what really reinforces clericalism in the culture, by the fact that we have to keep this parish system going. When you talk about a vocation crisis, it's only a crisis because we are insisting on thinking that we need all these churches open with all these positions that need to be filled by priests. So, if you closed 3/4 of all this stuff, I mean, you would have a far healthier clergy to begin with.
Yeah, and it might mean Catholics have to drive, a further distance to go to Mass or whatever, but it would be a much more vibrant experience.
They will if they want to go. I mean, they will. I mean, that's the interesting thing. Yeah.
We drive 50 minutes to get to the ordinariate parish from our farm. simply because we think it's damn worth the drive, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the video store analogy limps a little bit because the video store died because technology advanced. That you got DVD players and then eventually streaming on the internet. Yeah, so eventually, nevertheless, the analogy is an apt one because what you're really talking about is the continued fixation on a model that's completely out of date. So, it's like our churches are still run like Our Lady of Blockbuster. We're still going to, when I walk into a parish and I see that they're still singing St. Louis Jesuit songs, Weston Priory songs, or using these outdated hymns from the 60s and 70s, I'm wondering what sort of time warp are we in as a church that we're still singing this garbage, this absolute trash? And then you attend the liturgy, and the liturgy is just endless noise, endless kinetic movement, endless, like how many people can we stuff in the sanctuary? And we can't have any silent downtime, like you said. It's got to be filled up with gentle, the dulcet tones of the piano in the background, like I'm in some kind of lounge having a drink with a friend, as the offertory is being brought up. It's, on the piano. Give me a break. And by the way, I'm going to say something deeply heretical here to a lot of people, which is one of the worst things that ever happened was the introduction of the organ into a church. I think organs should be banned from Catholic churches, to be honest with you. My favorite liturgy of the year is Good Friday, when they can't play the damn organ. All right, that overpowers and blasts you right out of there. Who can hear yourself think with Bela Lugosi up there pounding away, on the organ? I'm on a real.
Sometimes they can be played well, but unfortunately, I don't think there's enough people playing them well. But I agree with you. I'm not really a fan of organ
but the
music.
Thing is, I've heard in my own parish beautiful organ. I've been in parishes with gorgeous pipe organs. I'm not here trashing organ music per se. I just don't think they're liturgically proper. I don't think there should be musical instruments played at the liturgy. That's my private opinion. And I think the liturgy is far, far more profound and reverent when there are, and certainly, if I hear a drum or a trumpet, unless it's some kind of special event, like, I don't know. I can't think of one right off the top of my head.
Well, you bring up a good point.
That Trump is being crowned king of the universe or something like Charlemagne. So, then maybe
but you bring
trumpets.
You bring up a good point because, even the people on the more traditional side of things, they may be trying to do too much with the liturgy too. They may have good intentions of trying to make it very beautiful with all these more traditional, elements. But even that anything that makes the liturgy kind of too much. Like I keep on saying it, when it becomes just too much of an event and it's like an end in itself, I think that's not helpful. Because it just doesn't propel people to look at the world sacramentally. And I think that's the key thing. Like, I will joke around, I have very few, I think, moments, at Eucharist, I hate saying this, where I felt like in ecstasy, like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm heaven on earth. But as you know, I feel that way when I go to Bob Dylan concerts. But the thing is, and some people say, well, that's horrible. You should, the Eucharist is the best. But the thing is, I don't think I would feel that way about a Dylan show if it wasn't for the Eucharist. And I mean that the sacraments have propelled me to want to look at things sacramentally, that there's something more beyond them, and that they actually point to heaven, that everything in this world can point us to heaven and should, because it increases our desire for heaven. And even our social justice teachings are all more, oriented towards heaven than anything else. There's a eschatological dimension to the whole thing, because it's like, we really believe it's possible to have heaven on earth because God made this place. God made the universe, and it's his, So I think that all that should always go to that place where we're always seeking the hidden presence of Christ in all things and allowing it to completely manifest it for what it is, not as ends, but as means for where we're all going, which is heaven. Oh,
and you said that is also true. And you said at off air before we started recording. You know that a lot of my video interviews end up being very theological and academic, so I'm going to try and avoid that. But I will say this: I think one of the problems with, and let's bring it back full circle. What we're discussing here in the context of you pursuing your monastic vocation is the value of the contemplative life in the church, and that the church is not going to move forward with any sort of a reform of herself, all these scandals, all these abuses, unless she gets back to the basics and recovers this essentially contemplative core. Holiness is the core of the church. The two functions, Petrine and Marian. The Petrine function, the office, serves the Marian function, the subjectivity of holiness. That's the heart and soul of the church, and that is what the sacraments feed, which means a proper theology of the sacraments. What my friends like Michael Martin and Mike Sauter and stuff, who it might be listening to this, would say, and I would agree with them, we have lost any sense of sophiology in the church, any sense of a more cosmic understanding of the liturgy, of theology, of the gospel. The Western understanding of salvation has become so forensic, so legalistic, so tied to, so tied to Jesus died for my sins on a cross because God was angry and then Jesus died. Now God's not angry. And you get all these like Marian apocalyptic things. I can't hold back my son's wrath much longer. You need more penances, which makes Mary actually more merciful than her son. You're like, you're saving me from your son? So wait a minute, we're saved from Jesus by Mary because Jesus is so mad? I mean, this is insanity, right? But that's what we've become. So all of this would be addressed with a deeper sophiology. Sophiology means a sort of wisdom theology, which is very much related to the Gospel of John and other aspects of the New Testament. So anyway, I've been riffing long enough. What do you think about what I just said about the sophiology, cosmic dimension, all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that the thing is that people just probably are going to be asking, well, how do we do this? And I think that, I would just like to offer right now that every single person's capable of a contemplative life. I don't think that this is just meant for certain people to go to monasteries. And I think that we're made to be contemplatives. And what I mean by that is that we are made to be true to ourselves because we are all in the heart of God in that sense. I mean, He's the one who knew us before we were born. He's the one who we are returning to after our death. So we are His, and we understand this as Christians because we are incorporated into the body of His Son, of Christ. And I think that, we are always able to access that through our own spirit. We are body, soul, spirit. And I just believe that if you're able to take 5 minutes of just completely being okay by yourself in silence, that is one step getting to where you're saying. And because it has to start in a tangible way. I knew this in the monastery. Like if I'm not in actual meditation, doing nothing, so to speak, for 20 minutes in the morning, then I'm failing at this. I can't just be in the busyness of reciting the Psalms, so to speak, because the Psalms are only a reminder to go into the contemplative state. They themselves aren't the end. They are what propel you to go into that contemplative place. And I think that is what we're all made to do. And sometimes it also requires maybe just shutting up more. And we all need to do that. So another way of being contemplative is for 3 minutes, not yelling at your kids for 3 minutes, just to kind of, that kind of thing,
As horrible as it is to sort of yell at your kids, if on a constant basis, I would identify a couple of things as really inimical to the development of that ability to be contemplative. And one of those things is kind of what we're doing right now, but this little gem right here. I know in my own soul, in my own heart, I'm a leper speaking to other lepers here, people. That device has destroyed my attention span. That device has destroyed my ability to concentrate. I deliberately now do not bring it to church with me, even on silent mode, because I still find that I'm checking it all the darn time. Like, ooh, my phone just vibrated in my pocket. This could be very serious. And it's just some sort of CNN alert about, Joe Biden falling down the stairs or something. You know what I mean? So it's destroyed. So I would say one of the things that we can do to be more contemplative is to go on an internet fast, a cell phone fast, an iPad fast, to fast from I think there can be nothing more productive. I just saw an article yesterday on Spirit Daily. It said, studies show you go 1 week without attending to social media or your iPhone or whatever, your sense of psychological well-being goes through the roof. Through the roof. I think back to my youth. I didn't grow up with any of that, and I think we were far better off in many ways without it. I hate to sound like, well, in my day we ate broken glass for breakfast and we loved it because that's all we had. No,
right.
That's
the thing is, though, unfortunately, they're just not going away anytime soon. So I think you like, for example, I have the phone, and I just like set certain times for me. Like I'll just say, okay, I'm going to be in chapel for 20 minutes, and I just set the alarm. And so that way I can use the technology to just kind of give me something in a bite size, nugget, so it doesn't seem overwhelming. It's hard to just kind of say I'm going to disconnect, for even a week. But if you do things just in small ways, it's helpful. I mean, because I struggle with it too. So I struggle with it big time.
See what that is? That's a Timex expedition. It cost me $25 at Walmart because I'm an old fart and I shop at Walmart. And that is how I tell the time. So my point would be, yeah, that's great. But let's not also, and we might disagree on this, but I don't think we will. Let's not talk in terms of, well, these things are just tools, and it doesn't, they're neither good nor evil. It just depends on how you use them. There's a certain truth to that, but there's also a certain truth to the fact that Marshall McLuhan and Neil Postman and others, the medium is the message. This thing here alters the way we think. And so I wouldn't even use it. I wouldn't even use it as an alarm in my pocket when I go in to pray to tell me when my 20 minutes are up. I would use this little gem on my wrist, or if the church has a clock on the wall, to use that. I mean, I'm not criticizing you. I'm just saying, when I say a fast from internet and media, that's what I mean. I think we need more of that. Anyway, there was something else I was going to say that destroys the contemplative life. Oh, we could go down this path, and it is related to this same technology, and that's pornography. But I, nobody talks about it on the national level, in terms of our political elites, our educational elites. And the reason why they don't talk about it is because they're doing it and they're using it. And it's the elephant in the living room that nobody wants to talk about. Nothing is more destructive. Nothing is more destructive to the life, the contemplative life. If people use their private time, when they're alone time, instead of praying, meditating, doing Lectio Divina, they immediately go to their favorite porn sites. Bada bing. Go ahead.
Yeah, and actually that's why the phone itself is intrinsically problematic, because it has now plateaued so many different operations coming from one medium. So the fact that you can in a switch, or in a flick, go from porn to the breviary. I mean, just think about how crazy that is, right? I mean, like that's what you could do. I mean, and there is something wrong when we don't have now. For example, Larry, I only use the alarm because I don't have a watch that has an alarm. I mean, so I'm falling into the problem of the fact that it's like we have made one device doing so many different things, and before, everyone had a camera, and they had a computer, and they had a phone, and they're all individual things, and they had a certain type of integrity in and of themselves, and it actually helped your brain, like, oh, I'm doing this now, I'm not doing that. But once everything got plateaued, that's why the phone is intrinsically problematic. We would be better without them, period. Like, I completely agree with you. It's just a shame that now we have made it so that so many different operations happen using the same device, and that's a big problem.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's not. It's only going to get worse and worse because there's eventually within the next 10 years, maybe even fewer. They're talking about putting computer implants in your brain so that you have a virtual reality interface with your biological brain and so on. If people think that technology is stopping here, in 20 years, this is going to be looked at as one of the most primitive things imaginable. As we're actually morphing our biology with cybernetics. But we're way off topic now in some sense, but it's also not off topic because what I want the viewers to understand is the seriousness of your quest, Grib, and your desire to dive deep into the spiritual life, to really drink deeply from the truth, from the gospel, from Christ, from his church, her sacraments, and so on, to really understand what's about. Because what you understand is what a lot of people understand, from you to me to Rod Dreher to others. You're not going to survive the coming tsunami if you don't have this rootedness. And that's why I said earlier, we need to burn things down, not just out of anger or rage. It's like, the hell with it. We need to rethink how we approach the faith as Catholics. And if we don't begin with this contemplative evangelical grasping of the decisive moment, the Ernstfall, we are going to fail. We're not going to survive.
Right. And I mean, that's why, I mean, once again, I don't think that the higher ups in the church understand this. I mean, I hate to put it this way. I don't think, because they don't know what to do. Like I said, they have so ingrained into the video rental store model, so to speak, where it's like, we're too big to fail. Like they seriously think that, like, well, we can't close seminaries, we can't close churches, we can't, like, it's our patrimony. Like, they'll be talking that way. Like, we inherit all these great gifts. I'm like, well, guess what? I mean, like, they were meant for a time. We have to let go. I know that it's terribly depressing to do that in a certain way, but I mean, I just don't think that that Christ ever intended the church to be so much caught up in the actual, brick and mortar of things to kind of say that we cannot actually now look at where is the Spirit taking the church to do things that are actually spiritually efficacious, not just simply,
Yeah, what kinds of things are you envisioning? I mean, let's put flesh on these bones, in a sense.
Yeah.
It's all well and good for us to sit here and say, "Oh, burn it down," and there's no holiness in the church, and the liturgy is horrible, and get rid of organs.
Right.
So there might be a priest watching this who agrees with us, or lay leaders in their parish who agree with us, and they would ask us, "Well, then, okay, you think the current blockbuster video model of the parish is flawed? What are we talking about as a replacement model here?"
Well, I don't think you
tweak.
Here's the deal. I don't think you can replace the model with anything until you actually give priests and others committed Catholics the ability to discern what they feel like they're being called to do. I know first off, as a diocesan priest, I was constantly going to be doing things which I had no draw at all to do. And then people will be like, well, but you signed up for this. This is all about obedience. I'm like, yeah, I get that. But the thing is, though, I also get the fact that I'm just simply filling in, leaky holes on a boat that's filling up with water too. I mean, you have to understand that, like, as a priest, you perform certain functions, which you have to do. But there's also me, John, who has to be faithful to how Christ is specifically calling me as a Christian, and how that fits into the priesthood. I mean, it's just like a married person has certain commitments they have to do as a married person. But, we don't say, well, now that you're married, that means you have to be a lawyer or you have to be, there's different ways of living out the vocation that's specific to what ultimately connects to the infrastructural component to how the church starts to manifest. So I think from the get-go, bishops right now need to be giving priests permission to discern where is the Spirit working. And I bet you a lot of them don't even know. And I bet you because a lot of them aren't praying about that way. I think a lot of them have just fallen like, well, these are the things I have to do. But I can tell you from priests I know, younger guys, they are not happy doing what they're doing because they truly do love the Lord, but they feel like they can't love the Lord because they're too busy, running the old video rental store. And I hate to keep on using such a stupid analogy, but I'm just trying to say, like, it's constantly really banging your head and thinking, like, this is a silly model that we have to get away from. And unfortunately, the really big suburban parishes that everyone kind of hails as like, well, this must be where things are really happening. I'm not totally convinced. I think there's something very shallow happening in a lot of those places, and they're usually connected to some charismatic figure who was pastor there for like 30 years. I don't think that's a model that works either. So how do we give priests permission to be disciples before pastors? Meaning, are they listening to how they're being led? And do the bishops give them an ability to do that? I think that, if a bishop's looking at what all his parishes and where he has to just assign people, he's just going to take anyone who breathes very much and throws them in parishes. That is, there's no discernment going on with that. And no one wins in that model. No one wins. So the first thing is, can we listen to what priests are saying? Now, granted, everyone gets scared about that because they're going to say, well, they're just being selfish and they want certain things and they all want to be like, Bob Barron on TV all the time. I don't think that everyone is feeling that way. And I think that if a bishop's wise enough, he can discern what's going on if he's talking to the priests on that level. But that's just not happening. And just one more thing, connected to that too. We all know there's hardly any seminarians in any diocese. So why don't we just rethink that whole thing? So let's just at this point say, okay, the seminary, that was a nice idea. Now, if you're interested in becoming a priest, you're going to go immediately and live with this other priest who we feel is a good mentor for you. And that, we're going to have to, figure out ways for you to get the right education and figure out ways for you to meet the other seminarians. But I just think that we can be creative with this at this time period. We're talking about such few numbers. It's not like running massive things. The same thing about monasticism. We can be creative with how to run monasteries now because it's not like we have a lot of people doing this stuff. But it really requires to be completely detached from what we did and try to really listen deep within as to like what really brings us life and what really makes us alive and what are we really yearning for here individually so that we can kind of build a community.
What I hear you saying is, bishops have to allow their priests more time to discern, which means more time to pray, more time for contemplation, and the space to have a certain, to breathe, to be themselves to a great extent. And I think that's true of the lay people as well. They need that discernment. To me, it sounds too like what we really need is a doubling down on the evangelical counsels as well of poverty, chastity, and obedience. I mean, there used to be in the older church, right? You mentioned that great little prayer book that you had from the 50s earlier. And why wasn't this disseminated more? Because in the pre-Vatican II church, there were the spiritual athletes, the celibates, and they were the ones who could live the counsels and read little books like that. And then there was the non-spiritual athletes, the slobs like me, who are the lay people, and all we could handle was just barely getting by the commandments. Just don't violate any of the commandments and your butt's greased for heaven. That's all you can hope for. And that model failed and failed miserably. Unfortunately, I think it's still, despite what people say, it's still a model that's with us. I think it's still a model that's with us. With most lay people thinking, well, I don't commit adultery and I don't cheat on my taxes. I don't tell lies that much. So I'm good. I don't have to do anything outrageous. But this model is what's failing. That's what leads to a kind of boredom. So we have to double down on these evangelical counsels. And so I'm thinking of an example, our mutual friend, I hope he's watching, Father Michael Kerper. Mike Kerper is a former seminary classmate of mine from Mount St. Mary's in Emmitsburg. And it's one of the values of seminaries is you meet great people. You also meet some sketchy people, but you meet some great people. And Mike was one of them. Now he runs a parish up in New Hampshire in Nashua. He's about 69 years old. I think he'll be 70 this year. He desperately wants to retire. But one of the things that he's done with his parish is he's built a homeless shelter for the homeless, obviously, right at his parish, in the parish compound, and they have coffee and donuts every day for the homeless there, and eventually envisions it expanding into a soup kitchen and so on. And in many ways, it has enlivened his parish, and in many ways, it's harmed his parish, because it sort of drove away the people who want to know part of that. But then it attracted and really energized people who did want part of that. And yet, as he thinks about potentially retiring, he says, I can't retire because I can't think of a single priest in my diocese that would want to take on this project. And I don't want this project.
That's a problem. I mean, because unfortunately, for better or for worse, that still supports like a form of clericalism. And I know Mike is the farthest from wanting to be a clerical guy, but like it somehow like the people in the parish have to take ownership of that in a way that transcends the need for the priest to be playing a role in that.
Well, but here's his point, though. That he wants to do that. But his point, and to go back to your point about the clericalistic model that we live in, is that if he leaves and a new pastor comes in, lay leadership or not, the new pastor has the power to say, we're shutting this crap down.
Yeah.
We're not doing this homeless stuff any. And the pastor has the power to do that.
Yeah. That is the problem.
That is what is so infantilizing about the church of the day. I mean, and a bishop can do that to his priests, all right? And the Pope can do that to bishops. Look at that poor bishop in Puerto Rico that Pope Francis just summarily kicked out of the episcopacy without so much as an investigation, all because the poor bishop didn't want to use some seminary there in Puerto Rico. Anyway, that's the point. The whole darn thing is so infantilizing with this top-down sort of clericalistic. No, neither one of us, right? Neither one of us is Protestant here. We're not saying down with the hierarchy. I'm not about to start writing for the National Catholic Reporter. Thank you very much. We're both still very Orthodox Catholics. But there's, as you've pointed out, John, there is a way you can remain an Orthodox Catholic and still burst those old wineskins, burst those old categories of how we were thinking. And the lay people have to be empowered far more than they are now. And the sort of Father Mike Kerper's, I think, situation is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, because, I was thinking about, like, what is clericalism? And there's been lots of definitions I've kind of given to that over the years. Some was like, it's a priest-centered ministry rather than people-centered ministry, or it's somehow thinking, more about something than you really do. But, at the end of the day, all the clericalism is the need to be in control. That is it. And I think that's what makes clericalism possible for anyone. I mean, that we can have lay people running things that are going to be equally as clericalistic. So clericalism, I think, is always connected to control. What is the remedy for the need to be in control? Well, contemplation, realizing that, hey, I'm really not in control. Like it's always going to come back to that. And let me also just share something here that I've been experiencing at Incarnation Monastery. Now, this is an urban monastery, so this is probably way a unique thing that people think that when they think about monasteries. But there's been something interesting that's been happening to me here. So we pray every day in the morning, and we have Vespers and Mass in the evening. So at 8 and at 5. The middle of the day, what the monks do? They go out and work, like real jobs. One's a clinical psychologist, one's an artist. I actually picked up a job too. Guess where I'm working? I'm working in a music studio. That's a whole other story. But it's interesting because the thing here is like, I'm actually doing something that's kind of connected to the monastery, but that's another story. But the interesting thing is like, this might actually be a certain type of model to learn from if priests actually had jobs in the world, which they may have to do, because once again, clericalism is also been supported by the fact that priests don't have to actually do things that normal people do, so to speak, during the week. They can, live off the rectory and how the whole infrastructure supports them. There may be a time where we're not going to have the luxury of that, and just think about how a healthier type of clergy could emerge with being able to be in the world with people, listening closer to what they're going through, and so like that becomes a contemplative action there too, by just working outside the rectory. Now, some people say, well, that's really just far down the line, or that's impossible. But it's happened in the past, and it can happen again. And I think there's something good about it.
Yeah, I mean, there was the whole worker priest tradition and stuff, and it has its downside. Absolutely, it has its downside too. But it has a huge upside, as you just pointed out. And I don't know what the answer is, but the answer is certainly to create priests, as the late Lorenzo Abacetti always said, to create priests that are human beings first, and to build off from that, and that's the key. Anyway, we've been talking now, I guess, for about an hour and 15 minutes. There are a few other. Do you have any other topics that you wanted to bring up before I launch into sort of one last one?
No, you can go.
Well, I was curious as to, in one sense, that okay, so you're pursuing. I want to bring it back to your spiritual journey, all right, and where you are. That there's a certain sense in which I think people of both of our generations. I'm a baby boomer, born in 1958. You were born in what year?
79.
79. So what? You're 42 now, 43? What are you now? You're
43.
You're
I'm
bald
old.
and ugly
Yep.
like me. You're just as bald and ugly as I am now. So
That I am.
we're both getting old. But the point is this, is that we're both of an era where something was drilled into us. And what was drilled into us was a kind of careerism. This idea that your life needs to follow a certain trajectory. And this is very American. You get all of your proper education or high school, then you head off to college, then you get maybe some advanced degrees, and then you decide what you want to be when you grow up. Okay? When I was 5, I wanted to be a fire truck, and I didn't have the clear distinction between animate and inanimate things, apparently. I clearly did not grow up. I don't know what I grew up to be, but it's not a fire truck. Although I was the son of a fire.
You're pretty close, though.
So what I want to discuss is people out there might be listening and thinking about their own vocation, their missional directive from God. One of the pitfalls, I think, in spiritual counseling of modern people of our generation, Grib, is the constant temptation to confuse that American careerist notion of my life. My life has to have this direction, and the missional concept of vocation. Have you thought about this at all? About the distinction between?
Yeah, big time. Because I think it gets back to Ignatius Loyola. When he talks about spiritual indifference, I think what he's really getting at is that we have made too much of an idol out of our decisions. Meaning that this decision is so paramount, and I got to get it right, because if I don't get it right, I'm screwed. And if I'm screwed, then my life sucks, and therefore, I've lost out on life. And then you just start carrying whatever regrets for forever because of that. To me, is that if you have less of a sense of that, the decision is paramount, but really how I respond to whatever I decide is actually more paramount, because that's how I actually see how God's responding to the decision I've made, hopefully with his help. Yeah. That to me becomes an open door to endless possibilities, because there's never a time you could put yourself in a corner where there's no way out. I mean, we both have lived such a varied life where, none of it never worked out the way that we thought it was going to work out. I mean, even a year ago, I would not have thought I would be in Berkeley again in an urban monastery. There was no way I was thinking that. So just so quickly, things change in a matter of months. I think that the obsession with decision making, I think, is a big problem. And I think that, at least as a priest, I constantly deal with younger people, always obsessing about what to do with their life, how to discern a vocation. I was like, why don't you just go and do this and just see what happens? I mean, there's nothing wrong with wasting a decision, so to speak, because it could lead to, it will definitely lead somewhere. And you don't need to know exactly where it leads. Because your life is not your own. Your life is not your own.
So this cuts to the heart, though, of the loss of this contemplative, mystical dimension, of the immersion in the mystery in so many people's lives. Because what happens is the number one thing we fear more than anything is that our lives lack meaning. And not just that our lives lack purpose, that they lack meaning. And in order to give our life meaning, we think it has to have this form, this structure of a career of some kind. In other words, meaning has to accrue to me from almost a Pelagian sense of what it is I'm doing with my life in terms of my career and these sorts of career decisions, as you put it. Unfortunately, let me take my own life. I started off as a seminarian thinking, absolutely, I'm going to be a priest someday. That's what I want to do. All right, well, I fell off that horse. I didn't become a priest. I chose to go into academic life. So, oh yeah, this is it. I'm meant to be a professor. So 20 years, I'm at DeSales University. I'm a really good teacher. I'm so great a scholar. I'm the best thing that's ever happened to the academic world ever. And this is clear. And then boom. No, I'm not doing this anymore. I never thought in a million years, you took me back to age 21, that I'd be running a Dorothy Day Catholic worker farm in, Dog Breath, Pennsylvania, raising sheep, and now talking to you over the internet. So, yeah. So the thing is, I've now come to realize that the meaning of my life does not revolve around any of those damn choices. God, and you know what? I don't know what God wants me to do with my life in that sense of, should I run a Catholic worker farm or should I open up a Dunkin' Donuts? I don't know. What do you want, God? I've never been into that kind of discernment. What I now realize is that what God wants from me is to simply shut the hell up and be with him, to worship him, to immerse myself in his love, no matter what I'm doing, to praise and honor God in the depth of my heart. It's not that it doesn't matter what we choose to do. Of course it matters what we choose to do. Yeah. There is meaning in becoming a doctor, a nurse, or, mining coal or whatever it is you do in life, you can bring the gospel there. But that is something antecedent of and from the actual job that you've chosen. And that comes from deep contemplative prayer.
Exactly. And I think the best way that's manifested is just how you live in the present moment. I mean, I even now, like, I'm in a dark spot in the sense where, like, I really don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, like, I feel like this is the right thing for me to do, but, like, I really don't know. But guess where I do find meaning? I feel meaning when I walk outside and I just smile at someone and they smile back at me. I know it sounds so, like, hippy dippy, but, like, I think a lot happens in these little moments. And once again, that can only happen when you're contemplating the moment. Like, oh, this person's in front of me. Maybe I should smile at them. Like, I mean, that's being a contemplative in action. And I know, like I said, there's so many different people out there saying these types of, like, self-help type of things. I get that, but let's not, like, kind of think that somehow that's not ultimately connected to how a Christian lives their life too. I mean, like, we're called to be joyful in the world and be able to recognize that everything is pointing to heaven, and we pray that people can see us as pointing to heaven as well for them. So, like, that really is where the rubber hits the road. I just don't think the overarching life project that we are trying to achieve, it can be so abstract, it takes us away from the moment.
It does, and I'm glad you mentioned about smiling at people. That's not hippy-dippy. What it's called is the sacrament of our brothers and sisters, and to realize that the contemplative dimension of our lives is rooted in the love of God, but as Christ makes clear, there's a second part of that commandment, right, rooted in the first, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. To that end, I think modern living, to bring it back to iPhones and modernity and stuff and how it works against the contemplative life, modern living is impersonal, in an urban atmosphere anyway, is impersonal. It creates anonymity. It creates barriers between people when they're out in public. I mean, like, if one of the things I like to do, and it sometimes it works great, and sometimes it really flops, is I like to go out of my way to engage people at the grocery store in random conversations when I go to the grocery store. Now, sometimes people look at you like, get away from my kids, you old, bald, fat pervert. It's like, wait a minute, I wasn't talking to your kid. I wasn't within 20 feet of your kid. I didn't even know you had kids. Sorry about that. Bye-bye. Have a nice day. But seriously, most people really, it's amazing, right? I'm sure you've done this. And anybody out there listening knows what I'm talking about. You for whatever reason, you strike up a conversation with somebody at a grocery store, or the drugstore, or at the video store. Okay. And all of a sudden that anonymity is broken. that impersonalness is broken, that bubble is burst, and you discover there's a real, live, living human being standing here in front of me, and I think that this is this is not hippy dippy. I think this is an extremely important point that we can end with, which is that we're not talking here about retreating into our little compounds with our buried school buses and our rosaries stockpiled hand grenades embossed with Our Lady of Fatima on them and stuff, where we put up a perimeter of electric wire and videos, like, because we're hunkering down for an apocalypse like Latter-day Essenes. This is not, the vision that we're talking about here. We're not talking about that. We're talking about from the heart of the world to the center of the church, from the center of the church to the heart of the world. Mm-hmm. Our engagement is to be with the world. So all of this discussion of contemplation, all of this discussion of this, to love God better, is that we can then go out into the world as champions of Christ, even if all that means is talking to an old lady in the produce section at the grocery store.
Right. Because, see, that is living the Eucharist. If you're able to think that the Eucharist is such a holy moment and you're on your knees reverencing the Blessed Sacrament, take that same dynamic to the woman in the grocery store or whoever you meet on the street. Like, we have to recognize that same dynamic is possible, that there's a reverence in everything, because deep within, Christ is animating this person, and that presence of Christ in the other is what's going to transform me. And so it's a win-win.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
a win-win.
And it is.
Because it's clearly not just me being a nice guy and wanting to just kind of do something charitable. It's actually me needing to be converted more, and I will be converted more because of being present to this other person who will convey Christ to me in the most unexpected way. Because just as ugly as the cross is, there's nothing that is so marred that cannot actually reveal to us the actual presence of God in our midst.
Yeah, because love is not a zero-sum game. Love is fructifying. It's fruitful. Okay, so I think C.S. Lewis talks about the dipper and the bucket, whereas it's love. Mm-hmm. The more you give love away, the more you actually then possess as well. It's like you have to exercise a muscle in order for the muscle to grow. You have to give love away in order for love to grow. And Lewis, it's like dipping water out of a bucket endlessly and realizing that the more you give away to other people, the more the bucket is filled with water. So, but we too often think of our lives as, well, I don't want to extend myself that way because, it would take too much out of me. It would, it's quite the opposite. It enlivens us. But anyway, last words. I'm going to give you the last words, Father Grib, because we probably need to wrap this up.
Yeah, I think when we think about just contemplation, when we think about the ills that are in our church when it comes revolving around control and clericalism, I think we just have to get back to knowing how God loves us, and he loves us so selflessly, so much so that he's willing to receive, our rejection. One thing I want to share, actually, sorry for making this, but in Cardinal Sarah's The Power of Silence, I think you read that book. He conveys this really powerful story, and it's one that's really stuck with me. And it comes from a laywoman that I think he was talking with. And she said that, when she was a mother, when her kids were small, it was easy to kind of control what they were doing because, they just had to listen to her, right? I mean, like when they were about to hit the burner, she just intervened, right? But as they got older, she realized, oh, well, now they're going to be making their own decisions, and my desire to intervene is still there because I don't want them to make bad decisions and do things that are going to hurt themselves. But in a very contemplative way, she also understood that it wasn't just because she was worried about her kids. She was actually thinking about herself getting hurt, and she didn't want to get hurt by her children making bad decisions. And then she took it deeper and realized that, something, God's love is so selfless that he doesn't intervene even so that he can prevent being hurt, that he will actually be completely selfless. It's a way to kind of understand this remarkable gift of freedom that we have, but it's a way for us, I think, to help to be able to not be so quick to judge or the so need to control others, because we are in the presence and we are living in the presence of a God who so selflessly loves us. And only through him in Christ can we selflessly love. We can't do it on our own.
Wow. I can't think of a better way to end this conversation. So I want to, that was great. I want to thank, first off, my guest, Father Gribowich, my old student, my close collaborator and friend. And God bless you in your vocational. And thanks, everybody, for watching. I hope you got something out of the conversation. I know I did. I always do when I talk to Grib. And by the way, Grib is
a lot of fun.
He's a musician extraordinary, plays all kinds of stringed instruments, and is a giant Bob Dylan fan. I would say to the point of idolatry, but we won't go into that. And I love Dylan. I love Dylan too. I'm a big Leonard Cohen fan as well. So a shout out to Dylan and Leonard Cohen. All right, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right. Peace.